What's New in Autodesk AEC Collection 2021. My name is Daniele here from Imagine It. For those of you who don't know Imagine It, we are an industry leader in providing solutions and technology solutions to customers all across North America. We provide optimization, professional services, and increase productivity with training and support. So hopefully, since all of you are on a Imagine It marketing call, you've heard of us, but just kind of giving you an idea, we are a RAND worldwide company. So our Imagine It division specializes in all things Autodesk related, but we do have some sister companies with RAND 3D, who's a leading provider of Dassault software solutions and PTC training, and our Ascent division, which those are the folks that make all of the different training manuals for all Autodesk related authorized training materials, as well as PTC and Dassault software. And just a quick graph here, image of all of our office locations across North America. So we have a pretty widespread reach across North America, so pretty big presence. For me personally, I've got 15 plus years experience professionally with architecture, engineering, and construction. Prior to working at Imagine It, I worked at exhibit marketing company as well as a pretty large architectural firm outside of Detroit here. And I'm currently the East Region Team Manager for Building Solutions at Imagine It. So I have been with Imagine It for close to 10 years now. My wife and I just recently had a baby back in March, so right before all of this COVID stuff started to hit. So there's a picture of us down there at the bottom, and can't forget my little dog Duke here. He'd be upset if I didn't include him in the slide. So that's kind of my snapshot there. And without stalling here, I will get right into the agenda for today's presentation. So first off, I haven't really timed this one out since this is the first of the AEC Collection presentations that I've done this year. But my guess is I'll probably go pretty quickly through the slide presentation. I might have a little bit of time at the end to do a little bit of demo, probably focusing more on the Revit side of things and maybe digging in a little bit more into disciplines of Revit. But the agenda for today is just an overview of the AEC Collection, so the different primary software that's included in the Collection suite. And then I'll go into the what's new key features of the primary software. Included in a lot of those slides or included in the software are interoperability workflows and some BIM 360 integration. Slide. Oops. I don't know if I cut off there, but I have a slide at the end of the presentation that kind of highlights some of the major BIM 360 integrations between the primary platforms that I'll talk about today. So, and then we'll wrap up with the Q&A, like Katana said. If you do have any questions, please type them in the panel, and I'll do my best, if I know the answer, to answer them at the end. And if not, we'll find the right people to answer them and get back to you via email. Okay, so just a quick overview here of the Autodesk AEC Collections for those of you that don't know. With the AEC Collection, we have many products and services bundled into one package, and we call that a collection now. Over 25 products and services, the primary ones being Revit, Civil 3D, AutoCAD, and all of the AutoCAD versions, so AutoCAD Architecture, AutoCAD Electrical, AutoCAD MEP, InfraWorks, Navisworks Manage, and 3ds Max. For the sake of what we have available at the time for this presentation, I'll be highlighting the what's new features in Revit, Civil 3D, AutoCAD, InfraWorks, 3ds Max, and then in kind of the secondary items, maybe not primary, but definitely highly utilized programs that are included in the suite. We've got Recap Pro, Advanced Steel, Fabrication for MEP, Insight, Formit Pro, Structural Bridge Design, Dynamo, Autodesk Rendering, which is just the cloud service, robot structure, and then a couple of other ones I didn't put in a slide, but we have vehicle tracking and some of the other BIM 360 integrations, which I'll talk about at the end. So I will highlight some of they've done a lot of improvements and enhancements to advanced steel, so I'll do an overview of those as well. So kind of just trying to keep with this being a high level for all of these different programs. We will roll out different presentations specifically per industry that might focus more on Civil 3D, InfraWorks, or what's new in Revit. So the purpose of the AEC collection is really just an overview of the what's new features, and it's not really meant for a detailed deep dive into one particular program. But like I said, if I do have time, I'll try to go through some of the interoperability, at least between Revit and some of the other programs included in the suite. Okay, so what's new? We'll start here with 3ds Max. So I know this is not a huge ask from our customers, but it's definitely one that falls within the collection. So just a few things here that were included in the update for 3ds Max. The Arnold renderer, Arnold 6.0, is now set as the default rendering engine in 3ds Max. So that's included in the software as opposed to the ART renderer. It's still there, but Arnold's now the default. Simplified PBR material workflows are now included. So really what that means is that with a simplified physically based material workflow, just faster real-time performance in your viewports, also with closer accuracy in the viewport shader. So if you're using ActiveX shaders in those viewports, your materials will look more accurate. So you're getting kind of draft views with accurate materials. And the fully export import of the physical materials in FBX formats. So that's kind of a big one there, to be able to import and export physical materials that are attached to the FBX files. A big interoperability item there. One great thing, if you customize your viewports and configure your viewport to max, you can now save them as defaults, so you don't have to constantly do that in new scenes. OSL, Open Shading Language shaders, now support a custom UI template designed in Qt Designer. So for those of you that use OSL shaders, this is a big improvement and something that's been a big ask for those of you that are using gaming workflows or getting into VR, just a more simplified UI to work with those OSL shaders. And I don't have the list here, but there are several new OSL shaders, including different metals and shadows and things like that. Other than that, in 3ds Max, we have increased save times for scenes with many assets, basic modeling improvements for chamfering and weighted normals on 3D objects. The SketchUp import has some improvements, so you can skip importing hidden elements in the SketchUp import. We can preserve layer information from our SketchUp files and use it to automatically assign imported objects to match our 3ds Max layers. And again, the FBX improvements, we can also now export animation only. So this is a big thing, again, for those of you working in AR, VR workflows, trying to export those animations to FBX assets. We have the option now to do that. So big one there. And again, VR workflow kind of related here, support exporting and importing OSL nodes into those different platforms. So whether you're using Unreal or maybe Stingray or Unity, that's a big improvement to 3ds Max. Okay. So now onto the big one, I guess, that probably one of our primary programs, since it just has such a reach to AEC, get into Revit. So I'll kind of focus this one more on the platform enhancements. Like I said earlier, we will do presentations specifically on what's new in Revit 2021, and we'll go through the different disciplines, but for the sake of the overview of this presentation, I'll try to focus on more of the platform enhancements than the disciplinary enhancements and improvements to the program. But you can see here, based on this list, that there are quite a few. new features and enhancements to Revit 2021. I would say the platform enhancements that I'll highlight are some of the big ones, but then maybe in architecture, a big one is the generative design structure. We have some more stuff just with structural detailing, and probably a big thing there, and we'll talk about this, or I'll talk about it in the Civil 3D and InfraWorks workflows or interoperability. But a big thing for structure is inclusion of some bridge design features. And then in MEP, it seems like the biggest enhancement there is probably on the electrical side with improvement of circuit naming, switchboard improvements, panel schedule nodes, and some different things there. Also, I'll talk about this with our BIM 360 integrations, but the P&ID modeler on BIM 360 docs for Plant 3D. Okay. All right, so big platform improvement here. We can now link PDFs and images. So instead of just kind of importing them in and managing them through the image manager, we can now link PDFs from cloud locations or local locations, which you can reload or remove from your project. So just like any other types of links, they now show up in the Manage Links dialog box, and you can add, you can reload, and remove those links from that same dialog. And also, if we want to convert the link to an import, kind of bind it to the Revit file, we have the ability to do that. So pretty simple. Took a long time, but yeah, good improvement there for those of you that are linking in PDF or trying to link in PDF or image files. I don't think we have much control over the visibility. I know that was a big ask to have some visibility graphic controls over PDFs. I don't believe there's any enhancement there yet, but maybe I'll take a gander at that if I get to a demo, just to look at the settings here. Okay. Some improvements to how you navigate to BIM 360 projects in the Revit home space. So instead of just being on that left panel now, we can search for projects over to the right side under your hub or your project location page on the right. So it's just a better way to differentiate between your recent files and cloud-hosted models instead of just looking at that little icon that might show up in the corner of the recent files. Like I said, you can search the long list of projects. So for those of you that are familiar with BIM 360 docs, this looks very similar to sort of that web page, your hub, where you can search through your projects. So those of you that are managing multiple BIM 360 projects, this is a much easier way to get to those projects that you need to get to right from your Revit welcome screen. And yeah, huge one here, easily access the help links. Oh, okay, cool. We also have a customized Revit workspace. This is probably a big thing for deployments. You know, it saves time in deployments, but also for those of you that might not have someone in IT that's structuring deployments and working with the INI files that come with Revit, just more of a friendly user interface for setting up your workspace. So you can see here on the right, we've got these little icons that you can click and turn off when setting up the user interface. And in turn, what that's going to do is it's going to automatically hide some of those ribbon tabs and panels that you might not use based on your discipline. So the job role kind of has some different presets, but you can go through and you can customize those by clicking and turning them on or off. You still have the same options through the options dialog box to turn certain tabs in the ribbon on or off, but for the initial setup, maybe this is kind of similar to how AutoCAD was working with profiles in the past, an initial install, but we can accept or decline those results, and you can restore back to a workspace if someone's customized it. Okay. All right, so we also have the ability to stripe rows within our Revit schedules for easier reading. So we've probably all been faced with some really large schedules in the past, and just kind of scrolling through or zooming in and out of the schedule can be confusing looking for information. So striping the schedule makes it easier to read. And you can see over on the right under the schedule view properties there, it just shows up under the appearance tab. So striping the rows, you can set a first row stripe color and a second row stripe color. And then there's also an option there right below that to show stripe rows on sheets. So if we want to, maybe just in the schedule view stripe them, then that's fine. If you want to actually show on the sheet and print with the coloring, you also have that option. So unlike your conditional formats that just highlight specific rows within the schedule or specific cells within the schedule that don't print, these colors will actually print when you go to print the schedule out. So maybe not a huge thing there, but kind of nice, especially when you're looking through a lot of really long schedules. This is a big one. I think this is probably for the AEC collection. We'll hear this throughout the Civil 3D and InfraWorks items as well, but there's an inclusion of an infrastructure whole set of model categories and annotation categories now in Revit. So if we look to the filter list over here on the right for view categories or view properties, we're not limited to just architecture, structure, mechanical, electrical, and piping anymore. We now have this infrastructure tab. And the idea here is the integration of bridge design. So including bridge design workflows from Civil 3D, from InfraWorks, and into Revit. So they say here 26, so I pulled this off of an Autodesk slide, 26 for new categories for model elements. I don't think that's completely accurate. There's some overlap with our normal structural categories like structural framing, structural foundation, but there are definitely some new specific infrastructure categories like bridge framing, bridge decks, bridge cables, and then annotation elements for those specific model categories. They do support the visibility graphic overrides just like any other Revit family categories. We can assign object styles to them, we can tag them and schedule them, and a new unit to support this civil infrastructure workflow has been added to Revit, so we can now change our units to US survey feet or survey foot in our project units. While we're on the subject of family categories and visibility graphics, we do have the inclusion now of this extra column in our filters tab within the visibility graphic overrides in Revit. So this enable filter, if you have filters assigned in your view, you can turn them on or off using enable filter. So if you want the overrides to be applied or if you don't want them to be applied, you can uncheck that checkbox. I think this is a really good feature for building a lot of different view templates instead of being very specific with which filters you always include in those view templates. You can kind of have a base set. So for me, this is a big improvement. I know that they're showing here a lot of structure or infrastructure categories or filters to the right, but I think this one could be really utilized in Revit MEP for different system types. For those of you that are using system type graphic overrides, we can enable different systems really quickly. Not just turning the visibility of those categories on or off, but applying or unapplying those filters in the views. So it kind of just creates maybe a nice consistent view template for the filters between mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. But other than that, there hasn't been any improvements to the view filters. They kind of revamped those a couple of years ago with conditionals and whatnot. This one, even though it seems simple, these are the ones that get you excited. We can now rotate with component for our tags. So instead of just having 90-degree rotation within our tags or having to figure out some weird workarounds, our tags will now rotate with the component and they will be accurate to that rotation. So the example to the right here obviously is with the table, and with the table family, the rotation, that angle that we rotate follows the alignment of the table. and that's in the family editor. Also, another improvement to families, we have voids, cut, family, geometry type, and instance parameters. So we can now assign or associate the voids to the family type instead of having to create a separate family, nesting it into another family and making that cut work. So those voids can be controlled to cut the different family types, but maybe not other family types. So now we can associate through the properties to turn them on or off. Then just kind of some basic other improvements and some additions to the platform. Consistent line style naming. This is one that always frustrated me with the hard-coded Revit line types that are in the carets there. They would kind of get grouped in different spots depending on how your default naming was, or if you forbid, God forbid, explode a CAD import in your Revit file, there would just be a jumbled mess of line styles, and the default ones would be jumbled up somewhere in the middle. Well, the hard-coded Revit line styles are now consistently bracketed. So we have lines, medium lines, thin lines, all in brackets, and those appear at the bottom of the line style list. So instead of being somewhere in the center, there is a button under the Insert tab for Get Autodesk Content that you can click to get to the cloud to install or get different Autodesk content, family content. Sun and shadow refinements improve the accuracy of shadows and different polar locations. Sunrise and sunset times now updated with project location. This kind of ties into one of the enhancements in Revit architecture with real-time rendering. So they have improved the real-time render within the viewports in Revit to now work with kind of the more up-to-date rendering engines, and this just speaks to that. So it's more accurate shadows based on their locations. Okay, pretty good on time. So I'm going to move on here to the Civil 3D and InfraWorks enhancements. Not as much here, but definitely some good stuff to cover for Civil 3D. So new civil structures and bridge design workflows that connect InfraWorks, Civil 3D, and Revit. So I mentioned that earlier, the interoperability between those programs. We do have pressure pipe networks and layout editing now. So kind of, it's interesting. These are things that are kind of Revit features that are now being integrated into 3D. But there are also enhancements to Dynamo for design automation within Civil 3D. So different new nodes in Dynamo, and the Dynamo player is now included in Civil 3D 2021. So something that's been in Revit for a little while, now in Civil 3D. So the civil structures workflow gives us more integrated tools to design, detail, and document bridge projects. Teams can work more effectively in parallel, sharing design data across various tools. So speaking to that interoperability between InfraWorks, Civil 3D, and Revit. And so who is this for? What market? Why is it important? Jump to the next one. The pressure pipe network and layout editing. So this one's nice because we're using familiar alignment tools to create linear paths as a baseline that becomes a pipe run. When the layout's complete, the appropriate parts are placed along the pipe run automatically. So some of the stuff that we have that those of you Revit users are used to, we're not integrating some of those features in Civil 3D. The network is then intelligent. It gives the user the ability to automatically apply the appropriate pipes and fittings to accommodate that pipe run path. So we can start with a path and we can update it. And changes to the pipe run result in the previous parts being replaced by the appropriate parts automatically. So probably for those of you that have worked in Revit with pipe runs and pipe design, that sounds very familiar. We can change the type in Revit. Well, we can now do that in Civil 3D. Those updates for Dynamo I just mentioned, they add some new nodes within Dynamo. The Dynamo player is also there. So if you are creating any type of Dynamo routines, you can set them in your Dynamo player and just play them on your Civil 3D projects. And the new nodes just give you some different enhancements. If you want some information on the new nodes, just reach out to us and we can send you over. There's a white paper that I have that I can send over those enhancements with the Dynamo scripts for Civil 3D. So for those of you that are automating tasks, that's a big improvement for Civil 3D. Just my take, some of these integrations seem curious between Revit and Civil 3D. It seems like they're really finally starting to try to get Civil 3D and Revit to play nicer. And one of the programs that might help out with that is InfraWorks. So again, the InfraWorks enhancement has a new interoperability between connecting InfraWorks, Civil 3D, and Revit, specifically for bridge design workflows. There are some corridor enhancements in InfraWorks and some 4K view optimization as well. So I think that might be wrong at the top there. So for InfraWorks, we have more integrated design tools. Actually, this is the same slide from before, but it applies to this InfraWorks slide as well. So just again, talking to that interoperability between the bridge design and Civil 3D and Revit, there's a exchange or a connector between the three as a plugin, so we can share those designs out. The corridor enhancements, we can now decide how to import alignments with corridors from Civil 3D. So importing a corridor, users can define mapping of materials to apply the corridor shapes and linkages. Supports the corridor baselines to place all the alignment types, including curb returns and offset alignments, as well as feature lines. So just tying those major elements from Civil 3D that we would use to create our Civil 3D layouts into InfraWorks to start to model and visualize those spaces in a much more streamlined, appropriate way. It's been a big ask in InfraWorks, and one of the challenges that InfraWorks designers or civil designers have had with InfraWorks is just that connection to InfraWorks and using and utilizing those objects. So I think that's a pretty big improvement, since corridors are so crucial to most of our designs in Civil 3D. The 4K view optimization, really this just has to do with sizing of output for InfraWorks. I don't know if it's, I guess it is a pretty big deal based on the monitors that you're using, but it's now supporting a 4K monitor, so ultra high resolution monitor, where before I think it had to upscale and it didn't look the greatest, especially because it is primarily a communication tool for visualization. All right, so getting into AutoCAD, normally by this time in the year, there's a lot of different marketing materials that are rolled out by Autodesk. So we kind of have more to go off of, and even in just the new features. I've installed AutoCAD 2021. There really isn't too much to base AutoCAD. So I did my research and I pulled as much as I could into the AutoCAD enhancements. I'm sure for the different flavors of AutoCAD, there are some specific features that I couldn't find. But one thing is that all of the specialized tool sets are now included into the collection with AutoCAD. So if you have base AutoCAD, you can install any of the different flavors of AutoCAD onto your computer, including mechanical, architecture, electrical, Map 3D, MEP, Plant 3D, and raster design. So all of those tool sets. So these are some of the ones that I found that just from day-to-day production are probably going to impact AutoCAD the most. For AutoCAD, we have a drawing history now, so we can see changes made to our drawings over time and get automatic insight on previous versions, so kind of as an overlay feature. The XREF compare kind of does the same thing, but with XREFs. So you can actually view or preview the XREF before you apply the changes without leaving the current drawing. So we can reload those changes as others might be updating the XREFs. The block palettes, this is just enhanced. You can now insert blocks from the Libraries tab in AutoCAD, so just kind of messing with the UI there. The Quick Measure tool has been enhanced. Quickly display all measurements, including areas and perimeters in a drawing. So for those of you that are using Quick Measure, I know it's kind of touchy, but it's been enhanced to make it a little bit more smooth when you're moving that Quick Measure tool around your drawings. For Trim and Extend, the default mode now does automatically select all potential boundaries. So instead of hitting your TR enter enter, and it does that by default. Huge enhancement there. For performance, just on the back end, 2D graphics, your pan and zoom are faster in real time because of automatic regeneration operations. 3D performance, same sort of thing, but with 3D, more responsive 3D pan, orbit, and zoom. And for auto list routines, the edit and debug files now have a new extension for Microsoft Visual Studio Code, and Unicode characters are now fully supported. And that's all I really could dig up on the AutoCAD enhancements. Advanced Steel has a whole bunch. I only highlighted a couple of things here because I know it's a pretty niche market, or maybe not as a widespread used program. But if you want more information on the what's new in Advanced Steel, reach out to us and we can provide you with some additional information. But I did want to highlight here, so this page kind of speaks to all of the enhancements, but I only highlighted a few that I think were the biggest ones to Advanced Steel. So new and enhanced modeling tools, interoperability with Revit. So that Steel extension that we have with Revit just has some additional features built in. SQL Server support, documentation improvements, and localization. So your drawing style simplification for the US markets. I think some of the tables and things that are included were simplified for the US in Advanced Steel. Okay. So for the interoperability, we can share our 350 level model information bidirectionally between Revit and Advanced Steel, so that that exchange happens between either program, and we can update our Revit models from Advanced Steel. We can transfer our Steel members and connections. So as long as they're mapped correctly into Revit, that will work correctly, where it should have been in the past, but something wasn't right between that exchange. And you can import, export, and synchronize changes between 2021 Revit and Advanced Steel. So a big enhancement and actually improving that workflow that we've all been asking for a long time for detailed steel connections. So the last thing here, last slide, and I will have time for a little bit of demo. We have our BIM 360 integrations. So a big one here, and I know I didn't highlight anything specifically with AutoCAD Plant 3D, but there's now collaboration with BIM 360 Design. So much like you can work with your Revit models in BIM 360 Design collaboration, this will now work with Plant 3D. So it connects your Plant 3D tool set with BIM 360, where we can set permissions via docs, and just like Revit, we have anytime, anywhere access to those files through BIM 360. Another integration or enhancement for AutoCAD files, so DWGs and DWT files, if we are storing them in BIM 360, when the user opens up a cloud file on their local machine, it's automatically going to lock those files or unlock them when they close out of them. So it might seem small, but that's a pretty big enhancement to that workflow if you're working in AutoCAD DWGs off of BIM 360. Pretty big feature enhancement there. And then we also have improvements to the Revit connector for P&ID. So since Plant 3D is now supported through BIM 360 Design, we have more or a better connection through the cloud with Revit and AutoCAD Plant P&ID schematic diagrams. So obviously those do enable pipe modeling and Revit for schematics, but that is synchronized then through the cloud. So again, there's a interoperable exchange between those two formats using that Revit connector. All right, so let's see, 35. So I've got a few minutes before I open up for Q&A. I do have some more slides after this, but just wanted to get into Revit just for a little bit and maybe talk about some of the enhancements. Or you know what? Let me see, instead of demo, I do have Revit open, but maybe instead of going into demo and showing you this stuff, I could just kind of briefly open up. I have this other PowerPoint open for what's new in Revit. So just specifically, and this is one that Autodesk has provided a bit more material for us to present. The other ones are not rolled out yet, and they usually roll out an AEC Collection presentation, but haven't yet, so I kind of had to piecemeal this one together. But for what's new in Revit 2021, had the different platform things I already talked about. We can host our cloud model in Europe. Probably for most of you, not a big deal. Let's jump through these enhancements I talked about. I didn't mention this, but Dynamo 2.5 is already pre-installed inside of Revit, and a few different new nodes are installed as well. So next slide will show that. So just a few different packages or design Revit nodes in Dynamo are included in 2.5. Get hosted elements, I think, is a big one, for especially if you're trying to do fire rated walls, detect or to report that fire rating to other elements that might be hosted onto that object. We can do that through Dynamo scripting now. Talked about these, talked about this one. All right, so just I'll kind of go through the big ones for the different disciplines. So for generative design, this is now a new feature. We can't actually, for us at Imagine It, we don't have access to demonstrate this yet, but with the generative design tool, we can create different design iterations based on different criteria. So the example that's used here in this slide is showing based on where the windows are and maybe where egress is, the best layout for a space within an office. And it gives you those design options, basically automatically generates them based on your design criteria. And you can then apply one of those design options to your model. So really, really cool feature. We haven't really scraped the surface with this yet internally, but I think it's something that is going to give us a lot more control or a lot of options that we didn't have before in Revit. Maybe not for just space layout, but maybe for massing and area studies and a lot of different things. And they did include with this package or with the generative design utility or feature, I think there are 3 sample studies, this being one of them with space layout. I think they do have one for massing and then one for areas. I mentioned this, the real-time realistic views. They just updated the renderer so we could get better real-time renderings. They got rid of that button at the bottom of the view control to do your ray trace. So it's just a real-time render in your realistic view. And if your computer is good, it's going to be much faster if you have a good GPU for that. I notice on my laptop, it's probably not the best graphics card, and it kind of struggles with maybe rendering that out in real time. So it's probably hardware related, but for the most part, those images are going to look a lot nicer. So if you're doing a lot of visualization straight from Revit, good enhancement. So this one's a big one. We can now do slanted walls in Revit. So we can turn a wall from vertical to slanted, and I'll have just a slanted wall without having to assign a wall to a massing or face. For those of you that are working with a lot of manufacturers and sending out maybe curtain walls or different specific structural features to a fabricator, there is a big enhancement in Revit to inventor linking. So this is, from what I understand, it's more of a one-way street. So we can take our Revit model and we can link it into Inventor. And if the Revit model updates, then we can process that change back to Inventor, to our fabricators or to our manufacturers. The idea, I think, with any CAD is eventually that is going to be a two-way exchange. But for right now, from our practice or what we've seen, it's more of a one-way exchanged from Revit to Inventor. So all right, so with Revit structure, some new standard shapes for rebar with full fabrication instructions, so different bending instructions. We have, I guess, better options or better controls for our rebar modeling, greater support for circular structures, curved rebar. Different treatments. So at our rebar or our ends, we can change them from threaded to welded, and those will be modeled up. Solid fabrics. So just different visibility control, expanded for structure. Let's see, 41, okay. So you override hook lengths by instance. So instead of being set to your hook length by type, we can now override them by instance. And you can see over to the right there, you have your dimensions, and you can set those per instance. This one's in metric, but the idea there. Integrated precast automation. I haven't had a chance to mess around with any of these settings yet, but apparently fully integrated into Revit with precast. Imperial units are supported. Simplified deployment, control modeling overrides for precast assemblies. So I'm no precast expert, but if you are working with precast, that's a new feature to refresh those designs, and they're fully integrated into the Revit application. Again, some different nodes that are added to Dynamo specifically for structural. Integrated analysis, so some stuff that we would kind of normally see from robot structural analysis, we can now see directly in native Revit. Different forces. Steel editing enhancements, this ties kind of back to some of the advanced steel stuff, but we have more control over editing our steel connections. Let's see, all right, steel connection. So then lastly, for our MEP enhancements, we've got electrical circuit naming. So we can change our abbreviations and our load classes. We can also assign different phasing or phase labels to our circuits. Updates to switchboards and panel boards. So added the single phase LN panel boards. Panel schedules now hide columns for unused phases. And distribution systems and panels check for compatibility. And there's a warning if you have a mismatched distribution system. It's kind of similar like we have with normal electrical circuits. We now have those with panel boards for switches and switchboards. Updated parameter name for max number of circuits. Let's see. Let's go through this. So I mentioned, yep, enhancements to the electrical stuff. Let's see if there's anything else. Pipe flow units, fabrication, extension, integration. So I wanted to stop at about 45 minutes after, so I can see the chat icon blinking at me. So I will go ahead and get back to my presentation. There's a couple of sort of housekeeping items I wanted to show, and then we will open up the questions. So for those of you that don't know or that are sitting on the call and this matters to you, hit the wrong button, scroll down, current slide, there we go. You should know this by now, but the Autodesk licensing has changed. So I'll just keep this up on the screen for a bit, but something that everyone should be aware of. If you have questions about your licensing, you can reach out to us at Imagine It, and we can help you with any of your licensing questions. Also, for those of you that are working remotely from home, we have some remote working resources. Autodesk is extending or has extended their remote access program, which includes free access to all of the below utilities now through June 30th. But if you have any questions about any of that, we've catered to some of the priorities of our customers and are offering some expedited classes for BIM 360 docs and design. So if you have any interest in getting your company up to speed working remotely, if you haven't already, please reach out to us. We can help you to work remotely and get through this pandemic. Okay, and now I will go to our Q&A board here.
Hello. So I have a couple questions for you. One is about structural bridge design. Is it a plugin for Revit? Is it like Robot?
Let me try to open this up to show. Okay, so I have Revit open here. So the structural bridge design is done through an exchange, and it is an add-in. I don't have InfraWorks installed or Civil 3D installed on my machine. So it's one of those, I believe, that will show up as an add-in or a utility when you do have the other programs. But yes, it is a add-in or a plugin. It might be under. Yeah, it's not showing here, but yes.
Okay. Next question. Can you use information from PDFs in Revit? For example, if I want to measure a PDF line inside Revit or crop the PDF.
So unfortunately, a PDF is more, Revit doesn't really do a great job with PDFs yet. When we bring in a PDF, it's still sort of seen as a, one in here, if I have a good one, we grab a file from. Do we have one in here? Fundamentals. I thought I had PDFs in here. Let me see if I can find just a sample one. I can't believe on my C drive I don't have a sample PDF. But the answer is no, it's not like AutoCAD. Let's see. Let me just open up a sent PDF here and plug in one of these. Basically, what it's doing is it's linking in a reference to the image of that. So let me try to grab just one of our, this one should work. See how with the, when you link or import a PDF, it gives you a resolution. So it's basically breaking the vector formatting for that file and bringing it into Revit as basically an image reference. So it doesn't have those same snapping capabilities that you would have when you link a PDF or import a PDF into AutoCAD. So we don't have the PDF snap, unfortunately, and kind of the state of the PDF when you link it in is what you get. We don't really have anything to control, let's see, the settings of the PDF once it's brought in. So you can see when I zoom into it, how pixelated it is. So it is kind of a linker, it's an update, but we have to refresh. And I guess, oh, maybe, I didn't see this before, but I guess if the PDF has that supported vector data, that the snap feature is now there. So I was unaware, but maybe that works now. So I'd have to find one that I produced probably from an AutoCAD line drawing, but I'm guessing if it's got that there, then maybe it's still rasterized, but it's finding some of that line work to snap to.
So those are all the questions that we have right now. There are some questions about, will this be recorded and will I be able to get a copy? Yes, this is being recorded. We'll be able to send everybody a copy and we'll post this on our resource center as well. There are some questions here about licensing and perpetual maintenance. We'll be sure to have somebody follow up with you directly. And thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Katana. Thanks, everyone. Oh, here we go. I just wanted to see this for sure. So I brought in more of a plan view into this and enable snaps. Oh, there you go. So if it is produced as a vector file, then it will, it's funny though, because it's still rasterized, but it's finding those snaps, so kind of cool. I think that's actually the same way it does in AutoCAD. So awesome. Although I can't adjust the fade on it though. Cool. Is that lagging really bad, Katana?
Nope.
Okay, because my audience view, it's not showing it zooming in or anything, so just want to make sure. Updating. Probably a good thing I didn't try to demo too much on this, because it looks like there's a bit of latency in the screen share. Cool. Well, thank you.